like our world's a more complex world today than it is before. But at the end of the game, where do we really want to be? Okay. The consensus seems to be, at least, that there is a favorable way for us to engage each other. As what Guillermo has said, there's some improvement that the IMF has seen throughout the world, but are these improvements consistent with other developing countries? With that said, I want to go ahead and interview Guillermo on certain subjects that I think would be of interest to you guys and also would be of interest to the world. Because the subject matter that we're going to be talking about is a prevalent issue. And I think with this, you know, we have a mixture of individuals here that are from the diplomatic community, from the United Nations, and also from the business communities here in Romania. The subject matter that we really need to address is how can we incorporate our talents, our education, our business mechanisms so that all boats have been lifted. And with that said, I'm going to go ahead and transfer my question over to Guillermo and ask him. In the spring meeting with IMF, with all the governors that came over to Washington pertaining to the new IMF agenda and incorporating social media, for example, into communicating what it is that the IMF is doing and the strategy involved within that mechanism. How did the governors within IMF saw that as an influence factor, as a game changer, for example?
Well, as I described in my presentation, at the IMF, and this is more broadly, in Washington, international institutions, there's an increasing realization that there needs to be more understanding of policies in order for economic policies to be more effective, to be sustainable over time, and this hasn't happened before. The opportunities that we have today to achieve that objective are unparalleled and are new, and we are now adapting to this new world with these new opportunities of communication, of making ourselves understood that were not there before. So in this sense, for example, social media, as you refer, it's an increasingly important element in our communication strategy. Right now, we just discussed, we're having pilot projects to communicate our key messages in different countries through social media. It's the first time we're doing this, and then we're going to expand through the whole world. And I think this is where we're going. Into the future, how we communicate with people in a completely new, different way.
In Madame Lagarde's speech in London at the Divilly lecture that was hosted by the British Parliament, she mentioned that the clues of the future can often be read through the tea leaves of the past. Having to analyze that statement, that quote that she had mentioned, I don't know if you've heard it, how is this relevant, do you think, in today's new world market?
So I think the same that is true for international organizations is the same for corporations. In the past, when we went about business, our own businesses, without explaining, without feeling the need that we have to engage and go out to the world and be more transparent about what we do, that affected our capacity to be effective down the road. So we did manage to secure good policies at the time, but then because nobody understood what they were about or what the benefits were, it happened to be the case that many of those reforms were backtracked in many countries and left them exposed to economic crisis. So now, we're learning the lessons from the past, and we are trying to become more open, to explain more what we do, to be more transparent about the decisions. Now every single document of the IMF is, for example, posted in the website. I mean, this is a first step. In the past, there's no single document posted on the website even when internet existed. So now this is a first step. Then social media is going to be is being already another one. And this is how things are moving. And I think for private corporations, it's similar in the sense that in the past, you know, a mining company could engage in a massive project in Romania, say, without doing much of an explanation of what was the strategy and what were going to be the consequences. In today's world, people have access to information and they demand such information. And it's much more difficult to go about and pursue your objectives without being able to explain yourself, being transparent and being an effective communicator.
Do you think that the people that absorb this information are actually using it to qualify judgment? Or are they absorbing it that they have the technicalities that are able for them, they'll make it able for them to appreciate the contents of that message?
Yeah, so I think it's a process right now. I think we all feel in our daily lives that we are essentially drowning in a sea of information that it's very difficult to make sense of. So probably right now we are struggling a little bit, all of us, on how to make sense of this all. I think into the future the situation is gonna be improving in the sense that the information is gonna start to acquire some structure through institutions, through consultants. There's gonna be agencies that processing this information for us to be able to make a better sense of them. We at the IMF, we pretend to be one of those agencies trying to make sense of this massive information availability that we have today. And I'm sure that you are also seeking to pursue that role in capacity.
We've noticed that the IMF is getting to the point in its institutional mission that is somewhat have evolved to where it was before when Bretton Woods Pact was built 7 years ago. Where did you see the IMF moving forward in the next 5 to 10 years from now?
So the IMF is a strange institution that one of our lines of work, which is the lending, our objective when we lend is to get out of business. So the IMF lends so the country can recover from the crisis as quickly as possible, pay back the IMF and start to grow very strongly and therefore without a need for financial assistance from the international institutions. So we do hope that over the next 5 and 10 years we can rely less and less on that line of work, on the lending. I mean, we do hope that we are lending now to Ukraine 17 billion euros. Ukraine is going through a very difficult economic situation. And our objective is that our lending allows Ukraine to start growing very fast and in 3-5 years, not to need this money anymore and actually be able to repay it to the international community. So that is always our objective, that our lending is temporary and that we go out of business as soon as possible. It's a very strange business to be in, but I guess it's shared with doctors as well, that you want to be there just to solve the situation and then get out. But of course, I mean, we are working, we want to strengthen our support for what I call the surveillance to help develop a framework in which the world becomes a safer place to do investments and for economies to grow and to avoid these massive collapses like we had in 2008 and 2009. So that's an agenda that is being developed and we are trying to support it and we expect in the next 5 or 10 years to continue to support it.
In your personal interaction with decision makers throughout, Romania and having specified the contents of it, how would you see them being able to communicate the mechanisms that you're endorsing or wanting for them to reflect on with the greater public? Are they communicating any form of, transparency or strategies to the Romanian public, in your opinion?
I think Romania as a transition economy has major challenges when it comes to debate regarding economic issues, to communication regarding economic issues, and at the end of the day to build a sound foundation for proper and sound economic policy making in the future. So we do see that there's challenges, there are gaps in terms of how the process of making decisions is working in Romania, and about how the civil society is being engaged. But this is common to most transition countries, and we understand that there's been some progress recently, and we expect more progress, in which we also expect to contribute to that progress.
Great. Anybody have questions?
Yes, I have two questions. What is the IMF doing regarding the black market function? I mean, do you pressure in any way the government? And the second one is there in another country in Europe, I don't know where it's possible, this is happening, enough, how do we say this? We have this institution, that collects taxes from the companies.
Yeah.
Is there in another country, is it happening like they are blocking your accounts? And from what I know in America, for example, if you do not pay the taxes to the government, you are going to be sued by the state. But here, after 15 or 25 or 30 days, your accounts are blocked. I mean, is there in another country, do you know, is it happening this or only Romania?
So the way we see it is that Romania needs to move to a completely different paradigm in terms of the relationship between the taxpayer and the tax authorities. It has to be a paradigm based on mutual trust. It has to be a paradigm what we call that the key philosophy behind it is self-assessment, and not people pay on the basis of fear, but pay on the basis of responsibility. So in order to support such framework, that is what we see in the advanced economies, Romania needs to undertake some important reforms. It needs to improve the trust to the tax administration agency, and the tax administration agency needs to take steps in order to become a much more trustworthy partner in this process.
Do you give advices to our government how to do it?
Yeah, so for example, right now we are, the World Bank, which is our partner, is deploying a massive effort inside the Revenue Administration Agency, which will revamp all the software of the agency. So what does software have to do? Once as you develop a new software, you develop new processes around the software. It's going to be an opportunity to think again how ANAF is being run and how it operates and how it deals with the customers. And you give one example, but there's many examples how we think that ANAF is not properly and not fairly dealing with the taxpayers. Just to give one example, when you pay in Romania what you have to pay in terms of taxes, you pay exactly your tax obligation, you can still be fined and you can still face penalties in Romania because you forgot to check one box, or you filled one box in one way with italics and not with bold. Because of very small technical issues, you can still be fined even when you're fully complying with your taxes. Instead of being just noticed, look, this is how you expected to do it, but not being, not fining you. So the whole philosophy of being, you have to be friendlier with your taxpayer. You have to inspire him to be more cooperative with ANAF and to be more trustful in the institution and start paying more taxes. And this is the one of the ways in which the black economy will come down in the future. Of course, you need the carrot, but you also need the stick. So this is the carrot, making ANAF a better place and being able to pay your taxes online, for example, in a much smoother way with less effort. This is the carrot. making you go to another. But of course, you also need the stick, and you know you need to be much more effective in auditing and going after the big evaders in this country. And that hasn't been done effectively. It's a long story why IMF hasn't been able to conduct audits in an effective way to where the action is. Has conducted a lot of audits in irrelevant places. So that's where we are also focusing, how to shift enough to start looking into the direction it should look at, and not in places where there's not much to collect. So this is the overall strategy that we're helping the government with. We are not going to achieve much in the next 3-6 months, but we are optimistic that after the whole process of reform ends in 2-4 years, the situation is going to be much better than what it is now.
Thank you. Sounds to me that the IMF is doing good in the country, and it looks as if they're promoting a much more sustainable and viable economy in Romania. And having said that, if we don't have any other questions, I think we can go ahead and conclude, unless there's another question. Okay, do we have enough time for one more?
Yes.
So, questions is one is regarding of VAT of the element. If you could make your opinion regarding this subject. And second, for rating agency regarding Romania, they are private rating agency who consider Romanian are not investment grade. How you consider for FMI to put these services for the countries to use one FMI system for rating for the countries?
Do you want to address that question?
Yes. So these are the questions.
So on the VAT, our belief is that the tax rates should be uniform across all goods and should be very broad-based. So as much goods as possible should be taxed on a uniform basis, because once you start giving exceptions, it's a slippery slope. If you give to one, why not to another? And if you give to the whole sector of food, why not give to medical service or schooling? It becomes really difficult where you draw the line, and then you have a political fight every single day. The country cannot move on its economic debate because you have a fight every day that I'm special and I need to be taxed specially. So we don't think it's a very conducive environment where you start to make exceptions in order for the country to move forward and to look ahead. But as I said, the IMF approach is we support government programs. So sometimes we still go along and we become a more flexible institution. So we still can go along, we can tolerate situations which we don't think are ideal, but when they are not also particularly bad for economic activity either. Right? On terms of the credit rating agencies and methods, there's many of them. There's a variety of them. I think there's merit on the work of many of these agencies, but I can't comment on their business model and the way they go about their processes in specific cases. As I said, our assessment of the Romanian economy that it's a very sound from a macroeconomic perspective and very predictable from the macroeconomic perspective, which gives Romania a big edge in the European region. So that's we can focus on our assessment of what our rating of Romania is, and we lend to Romania because we trust Romania a lot for the lending to be repaid.
With that said, thank you again for your time, Mr. Tolosa, for coming, and for everyone here that contributed. Thank you specifically to Christiana and Adrian for developing this event for us on behalf of the PGC Group, and for you, the diplomatic corps, and the business community here in Romania. We appreciate your time. Mulțumesc frumos, aveți o si frumos, o si bună frumos. Da? Mulțumesc!